Well, they weren't always hitting the receivers. The poise is there, and that's what you like to see in a young QB.
Jeff Currier, Mal Isaac, Bob Huber, thank you very much, gentlemen. That's our show for this week. The Riders against the Stampeders. The league opener, Sunday afternoon at Taylor Field. It gets underway at 2 o'clock, and it's going to be an interesting start to the 1987 football season. Sports Journal. Dark but dark day in the Canadian Football League's history. Commissioner Doug Mitchell in the CFL headquarters in Toronto announcing that the Montreal Alouettes are no longer. And for the first time since 1953, there are just 8 professional football teams in Canada. Bill Baker, the general manager of the Saskatchewan Roughriders, has joined me here on Sports Journal to talk about the ramifications of all this. Bill, I think the worst part about it is the timing. Less than 48 hours before the Alouettes are supposed to open the season, Norm Kimball says we can't do it.
Well, one of the considerations yesterday was to wait 2 or 3 more games and see if there wasn't a last-ditch effort to stimulate some Montreal interest. That had even been worse timing. So I think that we faced up to it and said, let's quit stalling, let's get on with business, let's make some decisions, let's move forward. And it was decided that, we would accept the withdrawal of the Montreal franchise effective this morning. That decision was made yesterday.
All right. Now, how seriously was an alternate location looked at? Is there an alternate location anywhere in Canada?
It was considered, but it wasn't really given a lot of debate or a lot of consideration. It was obvious that there would be a very severe financial problem in doing that in the short term, in a one-year basis, and it would take a whole bunch of gyrating around. It would create mass confusion for several weeks, and the league needs to get on with taking these 8 teams and worrying about these 8 teams alone, and now get on with playing football and presenting a very credible product.
And of course they would have needed a stadium of 20,000 at least. Is there one?
No, the one that was available was 10,000 in London with a possible 5,000 temporary seats of some sort. Can you imagine the confusion of trying to move a football team into London in 2 days?
Exactly.
It would have meant changing the schedule completely. It would have meant it would have taken several weeks. It just wasn't possible.
It's a different structure with the Eastern teams and the Western teams, but is there a comparison to the financial situation the Alouettes were in and what this club was facing until the telethon?
I think there was. Our budget is very similar. They budgeted this year for $6 million. Ours was $6.2 last year. This year it's $5.3. I was wondering throughout the whole period when they were going to run out of cash, because they had $2 million in the Bronfmans. Then they had to wait for the season ticket holders and also the walk-ins to pay the day-to-day expenses. They also had to wait for Grey Cup money, for equalization, for TV money at the very end of the season. So much like our situation, sometime, and obviously sooner than later, they were going to have a very serious cash problem.
A lot of people say this is the beginning of the end of the Canadian Football League, Bill. How do you read it?
Well, I'm pleased with what's happened. What was happening was the Montreal franchise, as the Saskatchewan franchise was doing a month ago, was dragging down the rest of the CFL. Montreal, we always, I guess, everybody said Montreal is the real problem. Saskatchewan, you will find a way. And I guess we all found a way. Montreal was not finding a way to solve its problems. Its credibility had been going on, or lack of credibility and lack of fan support had been going on for several years. They had a person in there who was not a francophone. He was not an Anglophone or a Montrealer, or at least a French Canadian or someone from Quebec. He was a guy who was a very well-known and respected football person from Edmonton. I think that makes it for a difficult combination. To me, it is time that the Montreal franchise gets put to bed, they get out of the way, and we get on with promoting the 8 teams. It was a big distraction. Every meeting we had for that I was involved in the last 6 months, we spent a lot of time discussing the Montreal franchise. That really was the focal point. Instead of us focusing upon how to present the product better, how to improve the product, we focused upon trying to help this one franchise survive.
All right. Does the league have any concerns of the big boys from south of the border, the NFL, moving into that huge stadium in Montreal?
Well, we discussed that very briefly also. At this point, at this time, I don't see that as at all of a detriment to the CFL. There are several American cities right now who have requested NFL franchises. I think that Montreal has demonstrated at this point it is not a good sports town. It does not support the CFL. It does not support baseball very well at all. It's a different sort of a city. And I think that the NFL would look very carefully at Montreal and their experience with the CFL and the experience of having the Expos before they would even consider seriously putting a franchise into that city. It's a huge facility. I mean, it's one of the world's biggest facilities. It seats 60,000, but it's big enough to seat 200, probably the way they built it. But it'll be interesting now to see what that's used for.
But a guy like Al Davis moved his team within the NFL against the wishes of the commissioner. I suppose there's the possibility somebody could say, well, if he can do it, I can do it. And
well, if they can do it, I've got no problem with that. If that happens, so it happens. I'm more concerned now with the CFL. Not more, I'm very concerned with the CFL. We now, and I think in retrospect, this has been a catalyst for us. Yesterday was the best meeting we've had since I've been involved. We sat around a table in Toronto and had a very open, frank discussion about things we hadn't discussed before. So I think it's a bit of a breakthrough that now I think that all of us will communicate better, we'll meet better, we'll be more concerned with business issues versus short-term football issues, i.e. rosters or quarterbacks. Let's get ourselves straightened around and get on with presenting a first-class entertainment product to Canada. And I think if we do that, and if the CFL can become a very credible league again, and I think it can, then we'll go on to, do we want to expand or not? But until that time, let's just focus upon the 8 teams and on Canada and presenting a great product.
And if you ever do get to the point you're going to expand, it's not going to be to a 9th team. You'd obviously want to go to have an even number of teams, right?
We'd go probably for 2 teams, and I think that's 2, 3, 4 years off. I'm not in a hurry for that. I would love to see this league get back on its ground, and I think we need a couple of years of hard work and a lot of cooperation to re-present, to sort of have a rebirth of the CFL. And I think there's been a lot of flushing of sort of bad medicine the last several months. The Saskatchewan situation is one. The Montreal is now history. I think it's time to move forward.
Yeah.
Get on with the job.
If people didn't believe a folding CFL franchise could happen, they got to believe it now, right?
Boy, they do, and that's one thing that concerned me in Saskatchewan is people wouldn't believe it. And it was what was going to happen here if we'd have kept on going without taking action, with everybody's cooperation a few weeks ago, we would have ended up in a very tough situation. I mean, with going out to somebody and saying, can we please have $2 million right now? Right.
Okay, Bill, it would have been even nicer had they put you in the Eastern Division.
That would have been a good deal.
Okay, Bill, thank you very much. Sports Journal continues in a moment.